before I got into med school, I used to watch all the videos of the American med school YouTubers who said, like, this is what the day in the life is like, and these is the hours you're expected to work. And I was like, going into med school thinking this is going to be intense, like this is going to be lots of work and an absolute grind. Now there are some differences between American med school and Australian med school. So basically, after American med school, you go straight into your specialty, so you're competing with everyone at that stage. Whereas after Australian medical school, you go into a basically very general like internship, and the specialty is only decided at a later time. So the competitiveness doesn't really ramp up until later on in the process. That being said, I think I and many others um, were sort of surrounded by all this new content and so much information. And it was hard initially in those first couple of years to manage that balance between studying and the rest of life. And so looking back on it now, this is probably what I wish I knew and how I would sort of manage things. So I think everyone has different definitions of work-life balance and what's work and what's life, and shouldn't your work like be part of your life? But the way I'll define it today is I think working is sacrificing your present self for your future self. So working or doing actions in order that will benefit you down the line in the future. Whereas life is sort of having that immediate gratification and enjoying things in the present. Now, that's not a great, like, it's not a perfect definition because obviously spending time with your friends and family is good both for your present self and for your future self. But when most people are studying for exams, they're not doing that because they intrinsically enjoy it. They're doing that to as a means to something else. They're doing that in order to pass their course and then so they can work a job and then provide for themselves in the future. Whereas when people talk about, I'm going to the movies or I'm hanging out with friends, like that's something you enjoy in the moment. That doesn't like watching, The Dictator again is not going to gradually help, future you. But there's a balance, right? You can't just sacrifice your whole present for the future because then you'll never stop. And you can't live completely in the present because then your future will be compromised. And so finding that balance, I think, is where I'm going to pinpoint the discussion today. And I think there's a few different areas we want to balance between. So obviously there's the study that you do for university or school. There's if you work and you have a job for money. There's the time you spend with friends, family, and relationships. There's the time you spend in solitude or on your own hobbies, maybe like golf, maybe like tennis. And there's a time spent with personal growth. That might be, reading books, meditation, doing exercises, journaling, etc. And you probably need some time in each of these areas. And so for me, how I'd cut it down is I try and think what is the absolute non-negotiables, things that I enjoy the most and things that are really hard to reschedule. So for me, it's like, soccer on Thursdays and Sundays is like a yes. Every single week, I'm a yes to those things. I get to hang out with my friends. I really enjoy it. And like there's nothing more important to me than sort of hanging out with those friends in that moment. So like study and work will never clash with that. My hobbies and personal growth, I can always move those things around a bit. Now, some people it's tricky with work because you're sort of bound by shifts. But I dedicate the friends and family time first because that's the thing with other people. That's a bit harder to move around. After friends and family, I think I put in work next because that tends to be obviously you have to schedule that with your bosses or organize that with other people, so it's a bit harder. But I think it's also good with studying to leave. If you're the person who likes like a nice 2 hour block to study, to try and find those 2 hour blocks. And if you have the privilege of being able to schedule your work, to not clash with that. I sort of let hobbies and personal growth fill in the remaining time. But to be honest, the best time for personal growth, I think, is that first hour of your morning because you can like choose that every single day. You can easily wake up an hour earlier, and that's when I'll do my sort of run. If I'm going to, I don't normally read on like the train or tram, like to or back from work. So that's a fixed time that's always there. And then hobbies, like if it's hobbies with other people, then that's something you need to prioritize. Whereas hobbies with yourself, you can be a bit more flexible. So, but if I enjoy like knitting or like playing cricket in the backyard with my, like just throwing the ball against the wall, those things I can do as like as a break within my study time. But for most people, I'd say like, I've got a priority list here between these categories. And then the things that I absolutely want to do, like if it's a friend's birthday party, like that's in. There's no way I'll miss that. And I'll try and schedule my study and work around that. So think about, it's like, I guess there's a few questions that are relevant here. And it's like, what's important to you? Number one, like what do you actually value? Do you value, doing well on your exams, or like do you value like the freedom of, playing golf once a week and just really enjoying that time in nature? So questions I would ask you is, what's the highlight of your week? For me, it's generally time with other people, whether that be soccer, just one-on-one, etc. And so that's what I'm going to schedule in first, and nothing's going to interfere with that. What are you prepared to sacrifice? Some people are like, if your friends are going out, three times a week, some people might say that's a bit too much. I'll sacrifice 2 of those and we'll go once a week. Cool. Some people are prepared to sacrifice their hobbies for their study, or their hobbies for their work, or their personal growth. So it just depends on which of these categories you're prepared to make sacrifices in, or sacrificing the future for the present, or vice versa. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Like what do you like actually derive your like meaning and enjoyment from? Because I think you need at least something, whether that's something in the week or something in the day, that you can really like jump for it and look forward to. Even micro moments like, having a coffee in the sun, can be enough to sort of sustain you through these things. So it's very personal, and it can sort of depend based on the season. Maybe before exams, you throw more wind to the studying work side of it. But I think number one is prioritize, and what's important to you, try not to sacrifice it. To save, like if you have those times blocked out, then it's just about how you can become more efficient with the other times. So if I think, I'm going to go to uni from 9 to 5 on Thursday, soccer will be from like 6:30 to like 9. I've got 5 to 6:30 there. I'm going to use that for studying. I've got 90 minutes. How can I use that more effectively? And I think that's where people can gain some time in their life, because there's lots of time that people spend just sort of, not in any of these areas, or like potentially wasted, or that could be spent more efficiently. And that's where I'd focus on, rather than compromising the soccer or the friends and the family time. So how can you make your study more efficient? How can you learn more in less time? How can you, study while doing, transport to some of these other things? Can you get your personal growth done, on the train or tram, or can you wake up an hour earlier to do that? These are some of the questions which will hopefully clear up some of the studying and personal growth, because they're the flexible things. The hobbies you can sort of use as a break, or dedicate time to that too. And so the less important things, you can sort of fill in the gaps, I think. But with the gaps, try and make your time as effective as possible for its goal. So maybe your goal is effective study. Maybe your goal is happiness, enjoyment, and relaxation. So you don't really want to hyper optimize that. Just, no emails, just yourself and being peaceful. So some questions for you to think about. This would be a cool journaling exercise if that's something that you do. But hopefully this was a helpful video, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions in the comments. Stay tuned for more videos on these topics, which hopefully you're enjoying and can take something away from. Thanks very much, guys.